Hello, I'm really glad you're here. On this channel, I share simple, quiet stories about life, love, and the little feelings we all go through. If that sounds like something you enjoy, don't forget to subscribe. Every subscriber gives me a little more encouragement to keep telling these stories. Now, let's begin today's story. The early winter sky in New York was a dull grey, like the unspoken thoughts lingering in the air. Emily Nguyen hurried down the rain-soaked sidewalk, her beige wool coat fluttering with each gust of wind. She had just wrapped up a meeting with European clients. Her phone still pressed to her ear, her voice professional to the point of being emotionless.
Yes, I'll compile the data before 9 p.m. tonight. Don't worry, I've prepared for every scenario.
She hung up and sighed. The lights from the shops lining the street reflected off her lightly made-up face, sharpening her features. Inside, Emily felt a familiar sense of satisfaction, the kind of victory that only someone at the peak of their career can know. But it was that very busyness that had unknowingly pushed the more important things in her life to the background. Her phone buzzed again. The screen displayed the name, Mom. She hesitated for a moment before tapping the answer button. On the other end, a soft voice with the gentle, slightly patient tone of long-time Vietnamese Americans spoke.
Emily, have you had dinner yet?
Not yet, Mum. I'm on my way home. How are you?
I'm fine. Just tidied up the shop. Nothing new, really. I just wanted to check in. Is it cold in New York these days?
It's cold, but I'm fine. Don't forget to wear something warm. Okay. And don't stay up too late.
I know. No matter what you do, just remember to eat properly.
The call ended with a few more familiar questions, a comforting routine. Emily slipped the phone into her pocket without much thought. To her. Mum had always been this way, a small but strong woman who knew how to manage everything, never complained, never asked for anything. Grace Nguyen came to the US in 1991 with empty hands, a kind-hearted husband, and the belief that this country would offer her children a better future. Her husband, a welder, died in a work accident when Emily was just 10 years old. From then on, Grace carried the weight of the entire family. By day, she cleaned houses for others, and by night, she cooked and tutored Emily and her younger brother, Alex. Later, when Emily got into college, Grace took a part-time job at a small grocery store in the suburbs, a stable and less physically demanding job. Emily knew all of this. She had never forgotten, never taken it for granted. But in the fast-paced rhythm of the city, those memories sometimes got pushed into a small corner of her mind, like old family photos hidden in a drawer, only glanced at from time to time. That evening, she arrived at her apartment in Midtown just before 8 p.m. The soft yellow light, the neatly arranged desk, everything in the apartment seemed optimized for productivity. She dropped her bag on the chair, opened her laptop, planning to work for a bit before resting. But before she knew it, the clock read almost midnight. Outside, the rain began to fall in a light drizzle. The sound of raindrops against the window pane was a reminder of another world, one where there were no salaries or meetings waiting, only the deep sigh of a mother in a quiet suburban kitchen. That kitchen, Emily remembered clearly, was where her mother had wrapped traditional rice cakes every Tet holiday, telling stories of her childhood in Saigon, reminding her not to forget her roots. But how many years had it been since she last celebrated Tet with her mum? She couldn't remember. She only knew that her quarterly meetings always seemed to coincide with the holiday. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her friends, a photo of a bustling bar with the text, "Where are you?" Emily stared at the screen for a moment before setting the phone aside. The night was unusually quiet. Emily sat there, surrounded by the warm lights of her modern apartment, yet her heart felt empty for some reason. She suddenly remembered her mother's words on the day she graduated from college.
No matter where you are or what you do, just remember to live well and take care of yourself.
At the time, Emily had only laughed. But now, in the quiet of the rainy night, those words felt like a heavy weight on her chest. She pulled out her phone, ready to call her mum, to say something, anything. But then she stopped. She told herself, I can do it tomorrow. And, like every other time, she returned to her emails, her deadlines, and the illusion that there would always be enough time to catch up on what was left undone. It was nearly midnight, and Emily's small apartment was still lit up. The bright white light from her computer screen cast over her face, tense yet alert. Her eyes locked on the Excel spreadsheet as if there was nothing else in the world. She had just finished her third report of the day when her phone buzzed. It wasn't a group text, nor a meeting reminder, it was a call. Alex appeared on the screen. Emily blinked. Her younger brother, he wasn't the type to call late at night, especially knowing how busy she always was. The last time Alex called after 10 p.m. was when his car got slightly bumped in the parking lot near his university, and he just wanted to know if he should call the police. She answered. Alex's voice came through dry, without any preamble.
Sis, Mom's not okay.
What?
She passed out at work today. I brought her home and called the doctor. They said she needs further tests, but you should come back. I don't feel like it's right.
The room seemed to shrink. The air conditioning stopped humming. The usual Slack and email notifications went silent. Only the long stretch of silence lingered after those words.
Tell me more. What happened to Mom?
She's been having stomach pains for a few days. I thought it was just digestive issues, but she hid it. She's been so tired, losing weight, barely eating. When she passed out at the shop, the owner had to call an ambulance. I just brought her home from the hospital. They scheduled an urgent follow-up.
Why didn't you tell me earlier?
I didn't think it was serious. And you've been so busy.
Alex's last words made Emily pause. Her mind echoed with many sounds typing on the keyboard, the click of high heels on marble floors, her boss's voice asking for report adjustments, the clink of glasses at a successful business event, but none of them sounded like her mother's sigh. She gripped the edge of the desk, a cold shiver rising in her spine despite the air conditioning set to 72 degrees.
I'll book an early train for tomorrow. You keep Mum resting. Don't let her do anything else.
Okay, I took the day off too. See you tomorrow.
The call ended. Emily stayed in her chair, her hands hanging limply at her sides, her gaze fixed on the keyboard. It felt like someone had squeezed the air out of her chest, not from fear, but from something much bigger, the truth that she hadn't known anything about her mother in months. Never once during those brief calls had she asked if her mother was really okay. Never once had she noticed the weakness in her voice. Never once had she asked, "Mum, do you need me?" She sprang up, opened the closet, and pulled out a small suitcase. Jeans, a sweater, a scarf, flat shoes, nothing fashionable, just practical. She stuffed each item into the suitcase, as if trying to fill the emptiness inside. When she finished, she stood still in the middle of her apartment, looking at everything around her, the spotless dining table, the modern leather chair, the bookshelf lined with business books. It all screamed success. But there was no sign of family, no framed photos, no gifts from her mum. Then she remembered there was a small box her mother had given her to bring back to New York. Inside were some dried lotus tea leaves from her garden and a jar of tamarind jam. She'd forgotten about it in the kitchen cabinet, never once touching it. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat up straight in the darkness, gripping her phone, wondering what tomorrow's train ride would bring her. A frail mother, a truth she wasn't ready to face, or a final chance to do what was right. Outside, the rain began to fall. It was still early morning when Emily stepped out of Penn Station. The streets were quiet, the yellow streetlight casting long, thin shadows across the damp cement. She pulled her suitcase behind her, walking quickly and decisively as if she were running away from something. The train to Hudson Valley was scheduled to depart at 6:12 a.m. She chose a window seat, holding a still warm cup of coffee, her eyes fixed on the thick darkness outside. As the train left Manhattan, the city lights slowly faded behind her, replaced by suburban areas still hazy in their early sleep. Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind was still spinning with Alex's words from the night before. The image of her mother fainting at the store kept repeating in her mind. Grace, and Wen, the woman who always stood tall and smiled softly when talking about life, was now lying in bed, too weak to overcome the pain on her own. She thought back to the times she called home, sometimes rushed before a meeting, sometimes squeezed in between flights. How many times had her mother said, "I'm fine," and Emily believed it without question, never probing further. Not because she didn't care, but because she thought her mother would always be fine. Mum. After all. She pulled out her phone and opened the Photos app. Among the thousands of pictures, business trips, conferences, fancy dinners, there were fewer than 10 with her mother. One was a shot from 2 years ago, on the front steps of their house at Christmas. Her mother wore a green sweater, holding a hot cup of tea and smiling. But now, as Emily looked more closely, she noticed her mother's red eyes and dark circles. At the time, Emily had brightened the photo, erasing those details. Suddenly, Emily felt like an outsider in her own family story, like a supporting character who had been absent for too long, only to return when everything had already changed. The train stopped at a small station. An elderly couple boarded, carrying a basket of vegetables and a large plastic box. They sat 2 seats away from Emily. The man gently covered his wife's legs with a scarf before leaning back. Emily watched them, then turned away, lips pressed tightly together. She remembered the days when her mother would stuff a scarf into her backpack, even when it wasn't cold, and the feeling of her mother's hand on her forehead when she had a fever. That was love, but a quiet, unspoken kind of love, the kind only a mother knows. Her phone buzzed, a text from Alex's mom's up. She asked if you're on your way. Emily didn't reply immediately. She gazed out the window. The early morning light was beginning to pale over the Hudson River. The water was calm, but inside her, a storm raged, relentlessly crashing against the shore. She gripped the strap of her bag tightly. For a fleeting moment, she wished she could return to when she was 12, when a simple hug could ease her mother's worries. But now, she knew she had to learn how to hold her mother as an adult, not for protection, but to be her anchor. As the train began to slow, preparing to stop at the station near home, Emily stood up and pulled her suitcase closer. Her breath formed a cloud in the crisp morning air. Each step she took toward the door felt like a countdown back to her childhood, back to the things she had missed. At the end of the platform, Alex stood waiting, wearing a thin coat and old canvas shoes. He looked thinner than before, but still steady. When he saw her, he nodded, not smiling, not saying anything, just silently taking the suitcase from her.
Mom's been waiting for you all morning.
Emily nodded softly, and the two of them walked side by side through the thin mist of the winter morning, stepping into a new chapter, one of truths, unspoken words, and perhaps the final one. The road leading to the old house twisted through the leafless trees, soaked by the morning mist and light rain from the night before. Emily sat in the car beside Alex, her hands intertwined, her gaze fixed on the fogged window as she seemed to search for fragments of forgotten memories hidden in the mist. The car drove slowly, the wind slipping through the cracks in the windows, carrying the scent of damp grass and cold earth from the suburbs, a scent she had long forgotten. The three-room wooden house sat nestled against the edge of the forest, old but familiar. It had once been her entire world, where mornings were filled with her mother's pho simmering on the stove, the fragrant steam rising, and where nights were spent studying for exams. Her mother quietly sewing beside her, never saying much, but always present. Now, it stood there silent, full of nostalgia, as if holding a secret that Emily was about to face. Alex stopped the car. They both got out. No words were exchanged. As Emily stepped through the faded wooden gate, she noticed the front door wasn't locked, just slightly ajar. It was as if the house had been waiting for her return. With its arms wide open, she took a deep breath. The creaky floorboards groaned underfoot. The family photo, crooked on the wall, was still there, the one her mother always dusted every weekend. The shoe rack still had her mother's old fuzzy slippers, and her coat hung neatly on the door hook. Everything remained just as it was, a small museum of unspoken routines, untouched by time. A soft noise came from upstairs, then Alex's voice echoed gently.
Mom's awake, but she's very weak. I fed her a little porridge.
Emily nodded, her heart suddenly tight. She placed her suitcase down, took off her coat, and slowly ascended the stairs, each step heavier, with all the things unsaid. The visits she hadn't made, the calls she had rushed through. Her mother's room was at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. The faint smell of oil balm and cold medicine filled the air, along with the soft warmth from the bedside lamp. Emily pushed the door open, and her heart sank. Grace Nguyen lay on her side in bed, her frail body wrapped in light-colored pajamas. Her face was pale, her cheeks hollow, her eyes barely open. Beneath the blanket, her thin hands were crossed, frail and frail. Gone was the image of the mother always bustling in the kitchen, the woman sitting up straight at the cash register now. There was only a small, fragile form. Emily sat down in the chair beside the bed. She didn't know what to do, so she simply placed her hand gently over her mother's. Grace opened her eyes. There was still a faint spark in her gaze, but it was the weak light of someone who had traveled too far on a long and tiring journey.
You're back, my child.
Yes, Mum?
She paused, her throat choking up. The words she had intended to say, "I'm sorry. I've missed you. What have you been hiding from me?" were all stuck, trapped in her chest. Grace tried to smile, but that smile brought tears to Emily's eyes. It was the same kind of smile her mother had when hiding her sorrow after hearing the doctor's prognosis that her father wouldn't make it. The same smile her mother wore when quietly patching up a torn shirt, never saying a word about not having enough money to buy a new one.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to worry you. I thought it was just a regular stomach ache.
Why didn't you tell me sooner?
You've been so busy. I didn't want to bother you.
A simple sentence, but it cut through Emily's heart like a knife. She turned her face away, struggling to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. For all these years, her mother had always been like that, giving everything, carrying everything, just so her children could live in peace. She gently took her mother's dry, thin hand, squeezing it lightly.
There's nothing more important than you, Mum. From now on, I'll be here with you.
Grace closed her eyes again. A tear rolled down her cheek. Maybe it was a tear, or maybe it was just the echo of the pain.
Having you here makes me so happy.
Outside the window, the sun began to rise. The soft golden light slipped through the old curtains, illuminating her mother's silver hair. The room suddenly felt warmer, not because of the sunlight, but because of the presence of love. But for Emily, this was just the beginning. She knew what lay ahead wouldn't be easy, and to face it, she would need more courage than ever before. 3 days later, the sky was still covered with a thin, gloomy mist. The rain fell lightly, like dust, enough to cool the air, but not wet her hair. Alex drove slowly on the highway, with Emily sitting in the back seat, her hand never leaving her mother's frail hand. Grace wore an old purple sweater, buttoned up carefully, her eyes gazing out the window as if counting every turn of the wheel. The local hospital was small but clean and quiet. Emily had made an appointment in advance, and Dr. Harper, the general practitioner, had agreed to see them that morning after some basic tests. Grace was scheduled for an ultrasound and a CT scan. Emily followed closely behind, trying to remember every instruction the doctor gave, but her mind was buzzing with worry. In the waiting room, she sat beside her mother, gently pressing her hand on her mother's shoulder every time she coughed. Alex sat across the room, holding a magazine, but unable to turn a single page. No one spoke. They just stared at the clock, at the door to the diagnostic room, then back at each other. No one wanted to think the worst, but all three of them could feel it looming closer. Near noon, a nurse called their names. They were led into a small, clean room with soft lighting. Dr. Harper sat behind a desk, her face calm but with a weight in her eyes.
Please take a seat. I'll try to explain everything clearly.
On the table were the CT and ultrasound images, blood work reports, and the results from this morning's tests. Emily squeezed her mother's hand under the table.
From the CT scan and ultrasound, we found a large abnormal mass in the colon. The tissue structure suggests malignancy. We can't confirm it's cancer without a biopsy, but the likelihood is high.
Emily felt the air in the room grow thick. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, while her mother's hand tightened around hers, not trembling, just holding firmly, as if trying to reassure her in return.
The tumor has likely been growing quietly for a long time. We need to perform a biopsy as soon as possible to determine the type of cells and how far it has spread. Only then can we discuss specific treatment options.
So, this isn't the final diagnosis, right?
Correct. But I strongly advise the family to prepare yourselves. In the case that the results are malignant and at an advanced stage, treatment, if available, will be very taxing. It will require a lot of time, energy, and emotional strength.
Emily nodded, her eyes stinging. She hadn't thought about chemotherapy or surgery yet. She just wanted to know how much time was left. Was there still a chance?
The biopsy. When can we do it?
As soon as tomorrow afternoon, if Mrs. Grace agrees.
Grace then spoke up, her voice small but clear.
I'll do the biopsy, but I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
If it's late-stage cancer, can I choose not to undergo treatment?
The question made both Emily and Alex turn to look at their mother. Emily spoke up, almost unable to hold back.
Mom.
But Grace continued to look at the doctor.
That decision is entirely up to you. If you refuse treatment, we can still provide pain management and home care.
Grace nodded lightly, then turned to look at her children.
I'm not afraid of the disease. I'm just afraid that I won't have the strength to go through all the shots, the nausea, the hospital stays, and not knowing how much time I have left.
But you don't know for sure. Don't think about it so soon.
I know, I'll do the biopsy, but I just want to say, if one day the doctor says there's not much time left, I don't want to die in a hospital. I just want to go home, to be with both of you.
Her voice wasn't weak, nor full of pity. It was calm, the calm of someone who had lived long enough, endured enough, and just wanted peace in the final chapter. Emily lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. She didn't dare promise anything, didn't dare object. She just held her mother's hand tighter, and for the first time in many years, she felt so small, so helpless. On the way home, no one said a word. The car moved slowly through the small streets, where the bare trees sighed in the cold wind. The houses stood quietly side by side, a few windows lit, but for the three people in the car, the whole world seemed to sink into a cold, grey silence, devoid of sound. Emily sat in the back, her eyes fixed on the overcast sky. She couldn't close her eyes. The image of Dr. Harper, her gentle but serious voice, the words her mother had said in the clinic, all of it played like a slow-motion reel in her mind. She glanced over at her mother. Grace had her head resting against the seat, her eyes closed, her face showing no emotion, not tired, not hopeless, just a silence as deep as the stillness of a winter lake. Alex drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel. His eyes were fixed on the road, his face unchanged, but every movement was stiff, as if the slightest touch could shatter him. When they reached home, Alex got out first, opened the door, and turned to help their mother. Grace nodded, holding his hand, taking slow steps up the porch. Emily followed, still not saying a word. She had so many things she wanted to say. "Mum, don't give up, Mum, you have to live for us," but they all choked in her throat. In the living room, the yellow light flickered on, casting a warm glow over the wooden walls and the family photos on the shelf. Emily helped her mother sit down in the armchair next to the fireplace. She pulled a thin blanket over her legs and then sat beside her. Alex went to the kitchen to make tea. Moments later, the three of them sat around the old wooden table, the steam rising from 3 cups. But no one drank.
Don't worry, kids, I'm not going anywhere yet.
Her voice was soft, as if she were talking about dinner. But Emily couldn't take it anymore. She set her cup down and turned to her mother.
How can you say that? How can I not worry? You've been like this and still trying to hide it.
I wasn't hiding it. I just thought it was just an old age thing. Plus, I didn't want you two to worry.
Emily stood up, walked a few steps, then turned back. Tears had already fallen, the second time that day.
You're always like this. Always suffering in silence. Always keeping quiet. And I keep living like you're never tired.
Grace extended her hand. Emily took it, then knelt beside her, resting her head on her mother's lap as she had when she was a child. Her mother's hand gently ran through her hair, slow and tender.
I don't do it because I'm strong. It's just I've gotten used to it. Raising 2 kids on my own, I learnt to stay quiet so everything wouldn't fall apart.
Alex sat still, his eyes on his mother, then on his sister. After a moment, he spoke, his voice hoarse and slow.
Mom will have the biopsy, then we'll figure out what's next. No matter what the results are, we won't let you go through this alone.
Grace nodded. She smiled. A tired but genuine smile, the smile of someone who has lived long enough, who has prepared herself for the inevitable.
I'm not afraid of dying. I'm just afraid of dying without seeing you both one last time.
Emily sobbed. Alex squeezed their mother's hand. The little house seemed to fall silent. Only the wind outside and the 3 breaths trying to hold on to one another. They didn't know how much time was left, but at this moment, every passing second felt sacred. A week had passed since the biopsy. The results were still being analyzed, but Dr. Harper's words, "most likely malignant cancer," hung over them like a cloud, making everything feel slower. Every hour felt heavy, yet more precious than ever. Emily had called her boss first thing the morning after returning from the hospital.
I need to take some time off. Not sure how long. Maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months.
On the other end of the line, her boss sounded slightly surprised.
Is everything okay, Emily?
My mom's sick. We don't know the results yet. But I need to be with her.
I understand. Family comes first. We'll manage things here.
Emily hung up the phone, letting out a long breath. No contract deadlines, no meetings. Nothing was more important than her mother right now. It had never been clearer. From that day on, she moved back into her old room, the room where her mother had once stuck butterfly stickers on the ceiling when she was a child, where she'd placed a wooden desk and a small cat-shaped lamp. The room was still there, only with a few cracks on the walls and the musty scent of time. But for Emily, it felt more comforting than any luxury apartment. Every morning, she helped her mother change clothes, brewed ginger tea, and helped her out onto the porch to sit in the sunlight. Every evening, she read beside her mother, or just sat in silence, letting her mother's hand rest on her hair like it used to when she was young. She didn't do anything grand, just small things, but to Emily, each act felt like a step toward returning. Alex still worked part-time in the mornings, then came home in the afternoons to help Emily cook, clean, or sometimes just sit beside their mother, playing old songs. No one spoke much. But the atmosphere in the house wasn't heavy anymore. It had become a quiet peace, even though it was a peace in waiting. One morning, as she was folding her mother's sweater, Emily found a small wooden box in the closet. Inside were old letters her mother had written to her father. The letter about Emily's scholarship when she was in high school. And even small notes. Emily likes ginger chicken. Remember to buy ginger. Alex needs new shoes. Wait for the paycheck next week. She sat down on the floor, holding the box in her arms, tears falling silently. Each piece of paper was a fragment of the years her mother had quietly kept their childhood alive, details so small that people could forget them. But her mother never did. That afternoon, Emily took her mother for a walk around the garden behind the house. The chrysanthemums her mother had planted were now just leaves. Grace walked slowly, leaning on her daughter's arm, but the smile never left her lips.
I thought you'd never come back to live here for more than a day.
I thought the same.
How do you feel now?
Like I'm relearning how to breathe.
Grace squeezed her daughter's hand gently, then stopped to look at the sky. The late afternoon sun was slanting, casting a soft golden light across her silver hair.
You know, I don't regret anything. I'm just afraid of one thing, that you two will forget I was ever here.
Emily squeezed her mother's hand tighter.
No, Mom. As long as my heart beats, you'll always be here.
The two of them stood there in the garden with no flowers, but filled with love as part of each other, needing no further confirmation. That morning, the sky was unusually clear. The golden sunlight stretched across the bare tree branches, warming the front yard and shining through the living room window. Emily was peeling an apple for her mother when the phone rang. The screen displayed the hospital's name. Her hand froze mid-motion. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at her mother. Grace was sitting, knitting a scarf, her demeanor calm. Emily took a deep breath, stepped out onto the porch, and answered the call.
Hello, Emily. I have the biopsy results for Mrs. Grace. If possible, I'd like the family to come in for a direct consultation.
Is something serious, Doctor?
I think it's better if we speak in person.
Emily hung up, her heart heavy as stone. She stood on the porch, gripping the old wooden railing. She recognized that tone, gentle, polite, but carrying bad news. In the afternoon, Alex took the day off to take their mother back to the hospital. On the way, no one spoke a word. The ride was silent. Like a journey to a place no one wanted to go, a place where all the questions had answers, but no one had the courage to hear them. In the consultation room, Dr. Harper didn't mince words. He placed the file in front of them, his voice steady and clear.
The biopsy results are confirmed. Mrs. Grace has stage 4 colon cancer. The tumor has metastasized to the liver and shows signs of spreading to the lymph nodes.
Emily felt a dull explosion in her mind. She glanced at her mother. Grace sat upright, her hands clasped together, just nodding slightly. No questions, no surprise, as if she had known all along and was just waiting for confirmation. Alex swallowed hard, his eyes reddening but keeping his composure.
How much time? How long do we have?
It's hard to say for sure. Some people live a few months. Others make it past a year if their health is strong enough. But I need to be clear, this is no longer a form of cancer that can be treated curatively.
Emily lowered her head to the table. No more tears, only an expanding emptiness in her chest.
Is there anything we can do to extend it? Just a few more months?
Chemotherapy could slow the progression, ease pain in the early stages, but it will be exhausting nausea, fatigue, hair loss, even infections, and we can't be sure it will make much of a difference.
Grace placed her hand gently on Emily's knuckles. That hand was still warm, though the skin had thinned and the veins stood out.
Sweetheart, I don't want to spend my last months in a hospital bed, hooked up to tubes, eating through a tube, not knowing if I'm alive or already gone.
But if you don't get treated...
I'm not giving up. I choose to live my last moments the way I want to.
The bright white room suddenly felt blurry to Emily. She didn't want her mother to suffer, but she also didn't want to lose her. She didn't want it to end. Dr. Harper handed over a packet of information about palliative care at home. Emily took it, her hands trembling. For the first time in her life, she clearly saw a reality that no amount of strength could change. On the way back, Emily didn't cry. Her mother rested her head on Alex's shoulder in the back seat, eyes closed, lips gently smiling. Emily turned her head, and in that moment, she understood her mother had accepted it, and now it was her turn to learn how to do the same, even though everything inside her world was screaming in refusal. That night, light rain fell. It wasn't heavy or overwhelming, just small drops steadily tapping on the old tin roof, creating a soft, monotonous melody. Inside the wooden house, the yellow light still shone, but the hearts of those inside were heavy with darkness. Emily stood by the sink in the kitchen, washing the dishes slowly. Her hands moved out of habit, but her mind was somewhere far away. The water kept running, but she couldn't hear it. Dr. Harper's words repeated in her mind, like an unskippable tape playing on loop. Alex quietly rearranged a few books on the shelf, then sat down on the sofa, staring blankly at the window. The rain soaked the glass, leaving long streaks that looked like the house itself was shedding tears. In the room, Grace had fallen asleep. She was exhausted after a long day, but still insisted on getting into bed on her own, changing into her pajamas by herself, as if to hold on to her last bit of dignity. Before sleeping, she said only one thing.
Don't worry about me. As long as I see you two smile every morning, that's enough.
But that night, no one smiled. Emily wiped her hands, walked into the living room, and sat down next to her brother. They sat silently, their shoulders nearly touching, but no words were exchanged. In that silence, there were things that didn't need to be said because speaking them would break everything.
Do you remember when Dad passed away?
I remember. Very clearly.
Back then, I didn't understand much. I just saw Mom sitting alone in the kitchen, not eating for 3 days. Now I know. She's been used to loss for a long time.
Emily didn't reply. She remembered how. Back then, her mother had told her not to cry in front of Alex, and how she took care of the funeral arrangements, greeted guests, handled paperwork all by herself. Mum was always the one who held things together, but this time, she had chosen not to fight anymore. After a moment, Alex stood up and spoke quietly.
I'm going to bed early. We still need to go to the market tomorrow. Try to get some rest, okay?
Emily nodded. She didn't think she would be able to sleep. But after turning off the lights, with only the sound of rain and the faint light from the porch lamp, she walked into her mother's room and sat beside the bed. Grace's breathing was even, her eyes closed, her face serene. Emily looked at her, gently touching the woolen blanket in the dim light. Her mother didn't look like a patient. She looked like someone peacefully dreaming. Emily pulled up a chair and sat closer, then bowed her head, whispering softly,
Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I was too busy running and didn't realize you were waiting for me to stop.
Her mother didn't answer, but there seemed to be something shifting on her face, a very subtle relaxation, as if the sleep itself knew that someone was holding her hand. That night, Emily stayed awake, but for the first time, she felt her heart truly settle. There was no panic, no more wondering why or what should I do. She just sat there, holding her mother's hand, listening to the rain like a child returning to the first warmth of life. A week after receiving the diagnosis, Grace was still at home. She wasn't bedridden, nor was she frail like people often imagine a terminally ill patient. She still woke up early, brushed her own hair, went out to the porch for tea, and sometimes reminded Alex to air out the blankets or Emily to add ginger to the soup. But everyone knew that was just the surface. The pain still came every night. Her back ached with every change in the weather, and the days when she couldn't eat anything had begun to outnumber the days she could. But Grace never complained. She had never complained. That morning, Emily woke up earlier than usual. It wasn't fully light yet, just a faint blue stretch on the horizon. She made a pot of lotus tea, the kind her mother had brought from Vietnam when she was still well enough to visit the homeland one last time. The scent of the tea filled the small kitchen, evoking memories of mornings long past, when Emily was a little girl with messy hair and sleepy eyes. And her mother's laughter rang like wind chimes. Grace sat on the porch, holding a small notebook. Emily brought 2 cups of tea, sitting down beside her.
I made lotus tea. Do you remember the smell?
Of course I remember. Back home, any house with a jar of lotus tea was treasured. You had to layer it, 1 layer at a time.
She took a small sip and closed her eyes. The morning sunlight filtered through the tree branches, casting a soft glow on her wrinkled cheeks and silver hair. Emily looked at her mother, wondering if this would be the last time she'd see her sitting like this, bathed in sunlight, surrounded by the fragrance of tea, and in a serenity that felt like a dream that hadn't yet ended. Alex came outside, holding the newspaper. He sat down on the porch steps, silent. Each of them had their own space, their own silence, but they were all connected by an unspoken thread. After breakfast, Emily and her mother went into the bedroom. She took out each shirt from the closet, asking which ones her mother wanted to keep and which ones could be donated. But Grace smiled and waved her hand.
I don't need to keep anything. Just as long as you two remember, that's enough.
Emily quietly folded the pale yellow sweater her mother used to wear on cold winter days. She remembered the first time her mother wore that sweater. It was the day she took Emily to college. The weather was cold, the wind strong, and her mother stood waiting outside the school for more than 2 hours, just to make sure her daughter was safely in class. By noon, Grace asked for a squash and shrimp soup. Emily didn't know how to make it, neither did Alex, but the 2 of them went into the kitchen, flipping through cookbooks, calling the neighbor for advice, and seasoning it for the 6th time before finally getting the taste right when they brought it out. She ate half a bowl, little, but the most she had eaten all week.
It's just like the soup you used to make, but this time it's better, because you two made it for me.
They all laughed, for the first time in days. The sound of laughter filled the house. It didn't last long, and it wasn't loud, but it was enough to lift the heavy feeling in the air. In the afternoon, Emily and her mother sat together by the window. Grace was stitching a lotus flower pattern she had started years ago. Her hands trembled. The needle moved slowly, but her gaze was focused as if it were the last thing she wanted to finish.
I won't live much longer, my dear, but I don't regret anything.
Don't say that, Mom.
I have to say it. There are things that if you don't say them in time, they'll turn into regrets.
Emily turned away, not wanting her mother to see the tears rising in her eyes. She knew she was right. Time doesn't wait for anyone, and when it passes, only memories remain. The evening darkened. Dinner was just plain rice porridge, but the three of them sat together at the table, the warm yellow light above, and old music playing softly from the radio. No one spoke about the illness. No one mentioned tomorrow. Only this moment, complete, silent, but full of love. A normal day, but for Emily, it was the most precious day she had ever had. That night, the wind was still. A full moon hung high in the dark sky, casting a silver glow over the roof, like a soft blanket, gently draped across everything below. Emily sat on the back porch, a cup of ginger tea gone cold in her hands, around her. The crickets chirped steadily. The old wooden boards creaked softly in the breeze. Inside her, an emptiness was slowly settling in, not loud, not overwhelming, just quiet, like mist seeping through fabric. Alex pushed the door open and stepped out. Holding an open can of soda, he sat beside his sister, giving her a small nod instead of a greeting.
Is Mom asleep?
Yeah, deep sleep. She was more tired than usual today.
They sat in silence for a few minutes, only the sounds of quiet sips, insects in the distance, and soft breathing blended into the night.
Did you ever, when we were kids, think Mom could ever get sick?
No, in my mind, she was invincible.
Alex let out a dry laugh, but it felt hollow in the stillness.
Same. Mom was like the pillar holding up our whole world. If she fell, it felt like everything would collapse.
And now, she's slowly falling.
Alex nodded. For the first time, he didn't try to be strong. His eyes were red, and his voice cracked.
I'm scared, Em.
Emily turned to look at him, the little brother who once fit in her lap. Now almost as tall as she was, but in this moment, he looked 5 years old, again lost, aching for a hug, a word of comfort.
I'm scared too, really scared. But we can't let her see it.
I know, but I hate this feeling. Like we're just living each day waiting for someone to leave.
I know. But I think the only thing we can do now is make sure not a single moment feels like she's alone.
Alex didn't answer. After a long pause, he let out a breath, quiet and slow.
Sometimes I wish I could trade places with her. I'm young, I'm strong.
I've thought that too, but she'd never let us. She spent her whole life sacrificing for us. And in the end, all she wants is for us to keep living.
They sat still, moonlight catching in their hair, black on Alex, soft brown on Emily, like two silhouettes holding on to something slipping through their fingers.
I regret a lot.
What do you regret?
Not being around more. All the time she called and I said I was busy. All the time she texted and I just left it unseen. Now I'd give anything to rewind, just to answer every message, to take back every minute I missed.
Me too.
Emily set her cup down and wrapped her arm around her brother's shoulders. Alex didn't move, he just lowered his head, letting silent tears fall. That night, The two grown children sat side by side, finally admitting what they had tried so long to hide. They weren't as strong as their mother believed, but in their vulnerability, something new began to form a silent promise that no matter how far their mother would go, her love would keep living through how they lived, how they loved, and how they held on to her memory. That afternoon, the sky was clear. Sunlight poured quietly through the living room window, stretching across the wooden floor in a warm, golden beam. Emily sat reading a book, while Grace leaned back against a pillow, a light blanket draped over her legs. There was no music, no TV, just the steady tick of the clock and the soft chirping of birds outside the back porch. Suddenly, Grace spoke, her voice low and calm, like a stream flowing gently through stone.
Did you know I almost didn't have you?
Emily lowered her book, turning to her mother, eyes wide.
What?
Back then, I was in my final year at university in Saigon. I'd only been seeing your father for a few months when I found out I was pregnant. Your grandmother was furious. She wanted me to end the pregnancy and go back to school. I was too young. My future was just beginning.
So what made you decide to keep me?
I heard your heartbeat during the first ultrasound. The doctor turned on the sound, and I heard that tiny heart racing like an alarm bell. From that moment, I knew I could never give up something so miraculous.
Emily sat still. She had never heard that story before. She'd always thought she was the product of a quiet, planned marriage, a child welcomed from the very beginning. But it turned out her very existence had been a brave decision from the start.
After that, your father dropped out to find work. I left school too, and we came to America through sponsorship. We had nothing, just you in my belly, and a one-way plane ticket to a country we didn't know.
Grace let out a soft laugh, then turned to look at her daughter.
You were the first reason I was brave enough to give up everything, and even now, I have no regrets.
Emily reached out and took her mother's hand. Her tears came gently, quietly, like spring rain.
Mom, I didn't know. I didn't know you gave up so much for me.
I didn't hide it. I just thought there was no need to bring it up. I never wanted you to feel like you owed me anything.
After a moment, Grace turned her gaze to the window, where the sunlight had begun to fade, and asked softly,
If one day I'm gone, will you remember me?
Mom, why would you ask that?
Because I'm leaving soon. I'm not afraid to die. I'm just afraid of being forgotten.
Emily stood, moved to the edge of the bed, and wrapped her arms around her mother.
You could never be forgotten. Not after everything you've done. I will never forget. Not ever.
They stayed like that, one mother who had given everything, and one daughter who finally understood how much she'd been given. The afternoon faded gently. There was no miracle, no extraordinary event, just a story told, a heart opened, and a love that had never been lost, only never spoken aloud. The seasonal wind had turned colder. The last of the leaves finally let go, drifting quietly onto the porch roof, the garden path, and the old wooden steps. Time no longer felt abstract. It became something tangible, unrelenting, marking itself hour by hour in the lines deepening on Grace's face. She no longer sat on the porch in the mornings, no longer had the strength to embroider, read the paper, or tell stories from the past. Even moving from bed to chair had become a long journey requiring help, patience, and quiet courage. Each day, Emily watched a small part of her mother slip away, a gesture, a smile, a glance, as if Grace were quietly withdrawing from this world, piece by piece, gently and sorrowfully. One morning, as Emily was changing the bed sheets, she heard her mother call. It wasn't loud, it wasn't urgent, but it carried a weight that rang like a silent bell inside her.
Water.
She rushed in and found her mother struggling to sit up. Emily quickly held her steady, handed her a glass of warm water, and sat beside her. Grace's hands trembled so much she couldn't hold the cup. The water spilled, soaking the bedspread. Emily wiped it away quickly, but what stung was not the wet sheet, it was seeing someone who had once been so fiercely strong, now unable to lift a cup.
Let me do it. Mum, from now on, you just say the word. I'll take care of everything.
I hate this feeling, like I'm becoming a burden.
You've never been a burden. You're the most precious thing I have.
Grace didn't respond, but tears slipped quietly from the corners of her eyes. Emily had never seen her mother cry like this, not from pain, but from knowing time was running out. Alex arrived after lunch, carrying bags of porridge and pain medication. He entered the room, set the bags down, and sat close beside their mother. Grace smiled softly, reaching up to touch his cheek, her voice barely a whisper.
My boy, you've grown so much.
You say that like we've just met.
To me, every time I see you two, it still feels like the first.
They ate lunch in silence. Emily fed her mother small spoonfuls of porridge. Grace only managed a few before growing tired, but she still tried to compliment the taste, still whispered thank you, as if saying love out loud was the one thing she needed her children to remember most. That afternoon, Grace slept more than usual. Her breathing no longer came steady, sometimes deep, sometimes shallow, and Emily found herself holding her breath each time she entered the room. She began setting alarms every 2 hours through the night, just to check if her mother was still breathing. Once, around 3 a.m., Emily entered the room to find her mother lying awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling.
You can't sleep.
No, I'm just afraid that if I close my eyes, I won't open them again.
Emily took her hand and, for the first time in her life, spoke like a child.
Then just keep your eyes on me. I'll sit right here until you fall into a deep sleep and dream something beautiful.
Grace smiled, so faint, so gentle, then slowly closed her eyes, her hand still holding tightly onto her daughter's. Outside, the wind howled across the porch. Winter didn't arrive with snow, but with silence, the silence of things quietly letting go. The sky stayed grey for 3 days straight. No rain, no sun, just a heavy blanket of clouds that made time feel suspended. Grace no longer got out of bed. The pain had worsened, forcing the doctor to prescribe a mild dose of morphine to ease her breathing. Once a woman who walked even when tired, she now could only turn her head, open her eyes slightly, and whisper short, broken phrases. Emily never left her side. She barely slept, barely ate, sipping just enough coffee to stay awake. Alex had taken leave from work, helping his sister take shifts, cooking, cleaning. They no longer wished for miracles, just one more day, one more hour. One afternoon, as the last of the daylight slipped away from the window, Grace motioned that she wanted to speak. Emily leaned in close.
Call Alex. I want to talk to both of you.
Alex entered, sitting beside the bed. He held his mother's hand, trying to keep his face steady. Emily sat on the other side. Her mother's hand rested between theirs, small, thin, cooling by the minute. Cooling by...
I don't know how many more times I'll open my eyes, so I need to say this now.
The room fell quiet outside. Wind rustled gently across the porch, carrying time with it.
I don't have much to leave behind. No money, no name, no treasures. But there are 2 things I want you both to hold on to as tightly as you're holding me now.
What are they, Mum?
First, never stop loving each other. You two are everything I have. After I'm gone, don't let anything or anyone drive you apart. Family, vere ofimas the root. And if the root dies, the tree won't survive.
Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. Alex held her hand tighter.
I promise. My sister and I will always stay together. You don't need to worry.
Second, slow down. I know life moves fast. It pulls people forward before they can catch their breath. But stop. Look around. Love when you still have time, because no one ever knows when the last time will be.
Emily broke into sobs. She had never heard her mother speak this much, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had spent her whole life showing love through action, not words.
I love you both, more than anything in this world. And if there's a next life, I'd choose to be your mother all over again.
A soft smile touched her lips as her eyes closed, tears slipping from the corners.
Mom.
Grace didn't answer. She just lay there, her breathing slow, her hand still resting between her two children. The light in the room grew dim. No one spoke. There was only the sound of 3 heartbeats, different, yet joined, whispering in unison, "Don't forget, don't forget." That morning, winter arrived in full. The air turned thick and damp with cold, and the porch outside was cloaked in a pale white mist, like a curtain quietly drawn across the world. Inside the house, everything was still so still. It felt like even time itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Emily woke from a light, broken sleep beside her mother's bed. She was still in the sweater she'd worn the night before, her head aching from too many sleepless nights. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was her mother's face. Grace was resting, peacefully, her breath so soft they almost weren't there. She reached out and gently touched her shoulder.
Mom.
No response. Emily leaned in closer, whispering again, her voice trembling.
Mom, I'm awake.
Grace's hand still lay on the blanket, fingers slightly curled, but her eyes didn't open. Emily placed 2 fingers on her neck, barely a pulse. Faint, then gone. Emily froze. She sat up straight, her entire body shaking, her chest tightened. No screaming, no sobbing, just a deep, hollow ache spreading from her heart to everything else. Alex walked in just then, still holding the hot water bottle. He saw the look in Emily's eyes and stopped in the doorway. No words were needed. He set the bottle down, walked slowly to the bed, and knelt beside their mother, taking her hand.
She's gone, isn't she?
Emily nodded. She leaned over and rested her head on their mother's chest. Tears fell softly, silently, like spring rain soaking into the earth. They didn't rush to call anyone, didn't rush to notify family. They simply sat there, one with her head bowed, the other holding a hand as if 2 children trying to hold on to a fading shadow in the pale light of morning. In the small bedroom, Grace lay as if asleep. Her face was peaceful, lips gently curled into a quiet smile. No more pain, no more worry. Just the calm of someone who had finished a long, exhausting journey and was finally resting, surrounded by the ones she loved most. Emily stood up. Pulling the blanket up to her mother's chest, she smoothed her hair, adjusted the pillow, and leaned in to place a kiss on her forehead for the first time since she was a child.
I love you. Thank you for staying as long as you did.
She walked to the door and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft glow through the clouds. She looked up, not searching for her mother, but believing she was there, somewhere without pain, without silence, and never beyond the reach of her children's love. Thank you for listening to the story. If you have any thoughts, feel free to share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Once again, I'm really happy to have you here. Don't forget to subscribe so we can keep sharing more stories about life together. Take care and see you next time.